So we think, okay, we're going to have this big increase in demand for computers. So we draw supply, demand. We have a big old increase in demand. And we get that quantity is going to increase. Great. And we get that price is going to increase. Uh-oh. Price did not increase. Right? Price went way down. So what's going on? Right? We walked through the logic for supply changes and also demand changes. One of them told us that price was going to go down. One of them told us the price was going to go up. Now we know what happened. We know the price did go down. But imagine that you're back in 1950 and thinking, what's a computer going to cost in 70 years? Right? You might be a bit stuck at this point. So let's think about what's going to happen when we have two different shifts at once, which is going to be the case in a lot of the time. Now, the problem that we're going to run into is that you sort of end up with two different predictions that are opposite, which is not particularly helpful. It depends. So if you want to do two changes at once, all we have to do is draw both of the changes on the same set of graphs. Okay. So instead of having two different graphs for my two different shifts, we have both a supply shift and a demand shift on the same set of graphs. And we're just going to go from our old equilibrium to our new equilibrium. Now, there's a problem with this, which is that you'll get a different answer depending on how you draw the change. Right? You can either draw it like this, and you can see that the price is going to go up, or you can draw it like this, and the price is going to go down. So which one's it going to be? Right? We can't just stop there. So when both demand and supply shift, we need more information. There's not enough information to figure out what's going on, right? Because we could end up either way, depending on how we draw it. So how should we draw it, right? We need to know that part as well. When both supply and demand shift, just knowing the direction that they shift in is not enough information, right? We can't just stop at knowing whether things are going to go up or down. So we're going to know one of the things. We're either going to know quantity and not price, or we're going to know price and not quantity. Okay. If both supply and demand increase, like we have here, we know that quantity is going to increase, right? Because we have two different shifts here. A demand increase says the quantity goes up. A supply increase says the quantity goes up. So quantity is going to go up, right? They agree. There's no fight there. However, we don't know what's going to happen with price, right? The demand increase says the price goes up. The supply increase says the price goes down. Those two fight, and we don't know who's going to win. And what it comes down to is which of the shifts is bigger, right? If you get a bigger supply shift than you get a demand shift, then the supply side is going to win. If you get a bigger demand shift than the supply shift, then the demand side is going to win, right? And then you know which is going to happen. So the question really is, when you have two shifts going at once, which of those two shifts is dominant, right? That's going to determine which sort of side of the thing wins out. And it turns out to be just as easy as adding together the changes that we already know. So what did we have before? We had if demand goes up, and price is going to go up, quantity is going to go up. Demand goes down, price is going to go down, quantity is going to go down. Supply goes up, price is going to go down, quantity is going to go up. Supply goes down, price is going to go up, quantity is going to go down. Right? These are the four changes that we talked about last time. So what happens if we get two changes at once? We just add together the arrows and see what happens. So what happens if demand goes up and supply goes up? Well, we look at what we got, right? So demand going up says the price goes up. Supply going up says the price goes down. Those two disagree. We don't know which one's going to win. We got a question mark. What about quantity? Demand up says the quantity goes up. Supply up says the quantity goes up. Those agree. So that's definitely going to happen, right? Nothing fighting against that. You're going to have the quantity goes up. We can do this for the other three combinations. What if demand goes up and supply goes down? Well, if demand goes up, price goes up. Supply goes down, price goes up. Those agree. So we get that price is going to go up. Demand goes up says quantity goes up. Supply down says quantity goes down. Those disagree. We don't know. Question mark, ambiguous. Demand goes down and supply goes up. All right, what do we got? Demand goes down, price goes down. Supply goes up, price goes down. Those agree. Price goes down. Demand goes down, quantity goes down. Supply goes up, quantity goes up. We don't know. Who's going to win? Question mark. And then finally, what if everything goes down Demand goes down, price goes down. Supply goes down, price goes up. We don't know. Question mark. Demand goes down, quantity goes down. Supply goes down, quantity goes down. Those agree. So quantity is going to go down. So that's as far as we can get if we only know the direction of the change. We don't know how big they are. So this feels like a cop-out, right? Because let's take this back to our computer example. I just told you that we were not going to be able to predict what's going to happen to the prices in the change, right? Doesn't that feel kind of weird? I mean, A, we definitely saw prices definitely went down. So what can we make of that? And then B, what use is this if it's not going to tell us what's going to happen with the prices? So to answer the first question, we did see the prices go down. What does that tell us? Well, that tells us basically that the supply shift that we had, that all these changes in technology and production technology were much bigger than these changes in demand side things, right? Not to say that these aren't big, but just these are bigger, which makes a lot of sense, right? The production, our ability to produce computers is like not even recognizable comparing 70 years ago, right? Huge, huge, huge difference. I mean, also the demand side is very different, but we can sort of conclude that maybe it wasn't as different as the supply side. Right? That's one thing we can do, right? So we can sort of look at what did happen and fill in our question mark. The second thing, okay, well, what use is this if we have a question mark? Well, let's take ourselves back to 1950. What's this say? What's the fact that we have a question mark there say? What that's saying is if you were an economist sitting in 1950 and thinking, I wonder what's going to happen to the price of computers, right? You'd think, well, we're probably going to get way better at producing them, right? So that's probably going to drive prices down. But also, like, everyone's going to need a computer, right? You're going to basically have to have a computer to live in the world. So, you can imagine, would somebody be willing to pay like $1 million for a computer? If they have to have it to live in the world, maybe they would, right? People pay lots and lots of money for things like cars and houses. If a house is as important as a laptop, then maybe people will pay as much as a house, right? And so in advance, not knowing how big those different rate changes are going to be, it's honest to say that we don't necessarily know which direction it's going to go, right? Or at least, then hopefully you do some more thinking about how big those changes are likely to be. That's sort of what we can make when we have two different changes, right? Added together, one of the things is ambiguous just based on the direction, but you can think about the size of the changes and try to figure things out. Let's apply this a little bit. So I got six different options here. We're not going to do all of them. Maybe let's pick one or two. So let's pick one. Which one of these should we talk about? What should we predict is going to happen?
Market for ride services.
Market for ride services. Okay, so take ourselves back. Before Uber existed, there were ride services around, right? You had taxis, you could call a limo, all that sort of stuff existed. And then we have ride-sharing apps. Okay, so let's think about what's going to happen on both sides of the market. So what are some changes to the supply side of the market that occurred because we now have these ride-sharing apps? What's changing?
Supply increases.
Supply, so definitely supply is going to increase, but why is supply going to increase, right? What are some of the determinants that are changing there?
You have more alternatives.
More alternatives, right? So we have people entering the market, right? We have more suppliers. And that's happening on two different levels, right? Not only do we have more people offering ride-sharing apps, a bunch of them, but also you have way more people who would consider driving a ride share, right? A lot of people who would not have done that before if you had to get a taxi license, but would afterwards. Yeah.
More like hybrid cars.
I didn't hear that, sorry?
More hybrid cars.
More hybrid cars. So more hybrid cars. If it's cheaper to drive, if the price of gas is going down, which it did for a while around the time that the ride-sharing apps were introduced, and also more people have cars, again, that's going to be more easier to provide that stuff. And if you don't need as much gas because you have a hybrid car. What else? Okay.
Would you consider the introduction of like the ride-sharing apps to be new technology in this time?
Well, yeah, because it's going to be cheaper to put together a driver and a person, right? So cheaper to arrange a ride, right? You no longer have to pay somebody to sit in an office and take phone calls for the taxi company, right? But
Yeah, basically I have like infinite supply because you're using other people's cars.
Yeah, you don't have to buy, it's less front cost, right? You don't have to buy a fleet of cars. People already have a car generally. But a lot of people do. Okay, so that's gonna be some supply changes. So let's think about what the direction we're gonna have. I mean, all these are pretty clearly gonna be in the higher supply direction. Up, 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 up. So we're gonna go and predict here, supply of ride shares is gonna go up, right? No big surprise. If we found something different, that'd be kind of weird, right? All right, let's talk about demand changes. What is changing about the demand for rideshare services?
Alternatives to taxis and Ubers like Zipcar and Turo.
Yeah, so there's just more options available, right? Options. Right, so if you didn't like taxis for some reason, but you do like the rideshare options, right? For whatever reason that might be, then yeah, and then you now have all options available to you that you didn't before. Might make more value, yeah.
It should be a cheaper option than parking.
Oh, so we don't need to pay for parking. Don't pay for parking. So this is a tricky one because we also didn't have to pay for parking when using rideshare services before, right? So this is a benefit of using a rideshare service, but it's not necessarily something that would change a whole lot because of the introduction of Uber, unless the price of parking is going up over time, right? If at the same time that Uber is getting introduced, parking costs go up, then yeah, you would expect that demand would also go up at the same time, right? Because it is a increase in a complement good for the other options of driving yourself. All right, what else? Anything else? Yeah. More buyers convenient. Convenience, right? It's just more convenient now it's easier to call a car, right? And so that's going to widen the number of people who are going to be considered doing such a thing. Also, around the time that these things are getting introduced, right? More cell phones. Didn't used to be the case that everyone just had a cell phone all the time. It used to be that you were kind of weird if you're the person with the cell phone. This was not something that Uber caused, right? Uber did not cause people to start getting a phone, but rideshare services are way more valuable if you have a cell phone, right? If you used to want to get a taxi, you'd have to go into a business or something like that and ask them to call the taxi for you, which is a lot more work, right? Now you can just do it yourself, or you could be at home and call it from there. So that's going to make ride shares in general more attractive. All right, so these things, again, seem pretty obvious to me. These are all going to increase demand, so we're going to get an increase in demand. So we already have this one drawn up based on our shifts, right? We either expect that this is going to be a bigger demand shift than a supply shift, and we're going to see prices go up, or it's going to be a bigger supply shift than demand shift, and prices are going to go down. We definitely think that the quantity is going to go up, right? Both of those point in the same direction, right? Both are going up. We're going to see that quantity goes up here, quantity goes up here, and total quantity goes up, which is definitely true, right? We definitely take more ride shares now than we used to when there was only taxis available. Prices, it's hard to tell a little bit, partially because it's not a competitive market, right? There are not a million different rideshare services, or individual drivers can't set their own prices. They're a bit controlled, right? So we do see that prices are lower than they used to be, but is that a competitive market price, or is that, Uber and Lyft deciding what prices are going to be? It's a little bit hard to say. Okay, let's do one more very briefly. What's another one we should do? Let's do one with books. Okay, so what happened to the market for books? Because of the invention of the electric light. So first of all, how about the supply side? Is anything changing about the supply of books with the invention of the electric light? Not a whole lot, maybe a little. Maybe you can run your factory at night now, where maybe you couldn't before. So not a whole lot. Maybe cheaper production. Maybe. But, it's not enough. We're just going to ignore it. So maybe we're not going to see any changes on the supply side, or at least very little, nothing important. How about the demand side? What's going to change for the demand for books when the electric light comes in?
More people can read at night, so they buy more books.
Yeah, more time to read, right? Reduces the cost of lighting, right? You could read at night before, but you had to buy a candle and burn it, and then you wouldn't have that candle anymore, and you have to go buy another candle, right? A lot cheaper to run electric light. So that's a reduction in the cost of a complement good. So you're gonna want more books to go along with that nighttime light. So that's gonna be an increase in demand. Anything else?
What would the price of electricity?
Cost of electricity, yeah. So, good question. I don't know what was happening with the cost of electricity around that time, because not everybody had electricity when the electric light was invented, right? It was not, it was pretty standard to not have electricity in your home. Yeah, I would guess that electricity was getting more expensive and then less expensive over time, but I actually don't know. It's a good one, I don't know. All right, well, we can stop with this one. We have up, demand's gonna increase. So we can probably guess what's gonna happen with only one shift. That's an easy one. Demand goes up, we would expect that both price and quantity would go up. Did that happen? Quantity definitely went up, right? A lot more people were reading books briefly after the invention of the electric light than before. But prices, I'm actually not sure what happened to the prices of books at the time. That'd be a good thing to go look at and see if we got it right. All right. Okay, cool. So we can take these sorts of real world changes, and you can imagine, changes that are actively happening right now, and think through what's happening on different sides of the market. What do we expect to change? And you can use this logic really anytime. Anytime you see something changing in the world, you can ask what's going to happen to the various markets. And keep in mind, you can ask about different kinds of. We're talking about the electric lights. We don't have to just look at electric lights as the effect of the market on electric lights. We can ask what happens to a related market for books. Right? You don't have to stop at one. You can sort of imagine how effects will spread out across different markets, especially once you start getting into complementary and substitute goods. Because we just determined people are going to read more books. Okay, well then what's going to happen to a related market to books, right? What's going to happen to the market for theater tickets, right? That's an alternative form of entertainment. Are people going to go to the theater less because they can read books more? Maybe, right? That'd be a knock-on effect